next presentation is from the American Institute of Stuttering. Heather Grossman, the executive director, has brought a team to tell us all about the exciting things happening in their organization. Heather, please take it away.
Thank you, Tom. I wouldn't exactly say a team, but I have brought with us one of our incredible clinicians, Margaret Miller, who will be speaking. So I'm just going to speak for a few minutes. She'll speak for a few minutes, and then we'll kind of engage in some conversation. So we're really lucky to be able to share with you all some of the exciting things that we do at AIS. AIS, the American Institute for Stuttering, is a non-for-profit in the United States. It started in 1998 by a therapist named Catherine Montgomery, who ironically, she was fabulous, but it was ironic that her approach started from precision fluency shaping, which, without spending too much time on it, we as an organization are pretty dead set against. We're almost as far from the pendulum as precision fluency that you could pretty much get, where I think of precision fluency, is about control and skill and words like must do and have to and things like that. At AIS, we're really sort of involved to be the opposite of that. So we'll talk more about that. Right now, we have 3 offices in the United States. The largest, the first one and largest is in New York City. Then the second one that started is in Georgia, where Carl Herder is with Margaret Miller. And then we recently started another satellite in Santa Monica with a therapist named Greg Scott. So, we're trying between us to try to get licenses in every state so that we can, pretty much serve. Okay. So what we want to talk about today is kind of what we call our sort of proprietary approach, it's a mouthful, to therapy, which we feel is very much a acceptance-based, cognitive therapy, open stuttering approach to therapy. So I see Vivian is here. Big shout out to her. We love the open stuttering idea. We love arts therapy. Our therapists have made sure they've been trained in that. So I'm not going to talk much about that. What we really want to focus on is how we sort of tie our avoidance reduction approach, and we're also very much a support organization. I think, and that was one of the things that Tom pointed out to me that I found, very heartening, which was the idea that we take support as seriously, if not more so sometimes, than the therapy. We really feel that when a person feels fear in the face of taking on a challenging situation, that fear is somewhat trauma-based, and that the key to overcoming trauma-based difficulties is connection with other people and healing through those connections. So we feel as an organization, it's just as important that we bring support, and we are a non-for-profit, so we can offer a lot of support type groups and workshops free of charge to clients once they're sort of vetted. And really vetted is often just one consultation with one of our therapists. And we also make sure that we are very much aligned in the approach. So while we are, and I heard today a lot of talk about individualization of therapy, which is incredibly important. And we talk a lot about that and how to individualize. But we also have certain therapeutic principles that we are unwavering about. So even though we might individualize what we're doing and how we're approaching it, we feel that it's very, very important that we're not, for example, many of our clients come to us having had a tremendous amount of therapy already. And when we get in there and start talking to them about their experiences, almost always, even if they were working on self-empowerment, advertising, accepting that they stutter, there was still this cognitive dissonance that said, but I really am doing a much better job when I'm fluent. And how do I be fluent? That's by using some sort of tool, whether it be a fluency shaping tool or a stuttering modification tool. To us at AIS, we almost kind of lump them together. It's interesting because we've always been trained to think of like fluency as, oppositional to stuttering modification. But when you really look at them, they both have in common the idea that they're behavioral. They are things that you are told to do in order to not stutter the way that you stutter. So with fluency, it's you're not allowed to stutter at all. Go ahead and be fluent. With stuttering modification, it's okay if you stutter, but we're going to draw a line in the sand that it has to be a pullout, or it has to be an easy bounce. And if it has anything beyond that, it's no good. And ironically, we find that being okay with the stuttering that, quote, is very, very tense and maybe is very ugly to the person, being okay with that is almost the secret to being okay with stuttering in general. And that's very much the open stuttering approach. But what I'm going to talk about for the next few minutes is how we combine rational emotive behavior therapy, specifically to our open stuttering acceptance-based approach to therapy. And one of the things that is interesting, just to look at a data point right away, we all know that most people who stutter, you put them alone in a room and you tell them to give the speech that they're going to give tomorrow at work, but nobody can hear you but you. Most of the time, there might be some stuttering. We've seen in studies that person will still have some stuttering, but most of it will be kind of flowy and easy. And many people experience 100% fluency in that situation. Now, we don't want to minimize that data point and say, well, if the person could just pretend they're alone, it just shows that it's all in their mind, because we know that as soon as a listener comes in the room, different areas of the brain start lighting up because you're being listened to. So stuttering is, we know, a communication disorder. It's not a speech disorder, really. So if you're alone, your speech mechanism works just fine. But when you're in a situation where you need to communicate, whatever's going on in the brain now throws a wrench in whatever natural fluency the person has and creates, and we use the language. So we don't say, a little stuttering or a lot of stuttering or good stuttering or bad stuttering. We use free flowing or clean or open stuttering as the dichotomy to tense avoidant stuttering. So a person doing that's not really their stuttering. It's the body avoiding and fearing that moment and doing sort of a starter to get into it. So in a REBT approach, and REBT, by the way, is considered the original cognitive behavior therapy. It started in the 1950s in New York by a very snarky psychologist named Albert Ellis, who was very funny and had a foul mouth, and almost found a way to comically help people dispute what are often pretty irrational core beliefs that they have about stuttering. So in the face of speaking alone, you don't have any core beliefs firing up, okay? You're alone in the bathroom, you're alone in your room, and you're giving your speech. There's no core beliefs that could possibly get in the way. Now you go into, and I'll just create a scenario, you're going to give that same speech the next day, and you walk into the room and you say, oh man, there's 20 people here. I can never do a speech in front of 20 people, okay? That would be considered a core belief. You've decided at some point along the line that you can talk alone, but you can't talk in front of 20 people. All right. So now we might call that overgeneralization. So now, as soon as you walk in the room here, I'll do another one. You notice that there's an important an important employee in the room, one that you didn't think was going to be there. And you say to yourself, oh no, if I stutter in front of that guy, it's going to be bad. I could possibly even lose my job. Oh my goodness, if I stutter today, I could lose my job. And then you know what's going to happen? I'm going to have no relationship and I'm going to be homeless. Okay, we call that catastrophizing. And many people go through that one. We'll do one more. The important employee, you say to yourself, oh, wow, if I do a really great job today, that person might promote me. But if I stutter, oh boy, there's no way I'm getting that promotion. So that's called mind reading. You're putting too much emphasis on what the other person might think. Okay, so those are just examples of what we call core beliefs that inhibit free-flowing speech. Now you're in that situation, you got all these gremlins flying, you're not even necessarily aware of them because core beliefs are very much subconscious. They've been built from lifetime of negative experiences possibly, and sometimes even microaggressions, like a therapist saying, great job with those tools. You're doing so great. And that just reinforces that fluent speech is better than stuttered speech, which brings you right to that situation where you're about to make this speech and you think it's going to be judged well, if only you could be fluent. Okay, so in that situation now, the core belief creates an emotional, what we call an emotional thunderstorm. Okay, so in those situations, the heart is going, all the anxiety response, you might have the sweaty palms, heart rate up, all of it. And now, because speech production goes through the amygdala and the emotional centers of the brain, and you're already now in a dysregulated state somewhat, and we know that in that state, it's akin to a fight or flight response somewhat. So any logical choices that you might make in another situation, such as, for example, maybe doing some easy stuttering to start, or doing some easy advertising, or making sure you really, do your power pose and all the things you've learned to really be confident, all that goes out the window. And now all you are is energy trying to be fluent. Okay. And what happens in that state? So here's the interesting part. So it's core belief, emotional thunderstorm, behavioral response. And the behavioral response now is going to be stuttering that's avoidant. So all of a sudden, all of their starters and secondaries and word substitutions, all the things that we know are under the iceberg of ways that people actively and subconsciously avoid stuttering. Okay, and you're probably going to be stuttering a lot more, because once you start stuttering, you're going to be ruminating. So then it becomes that brick wall, one to the other, to the other, to the other. Okay, so when we do good cognitive behavioral work, REBT, which we are going to talk a little bit about. Margaret's going to talk about some really fun things that we do to actually work on it. But in the end, what we often find is we're somewhat bringing a little bit closer those two states of how you speak when you're alone and you really don't give a what, because you don't care. So if you can shift your core beliefs a little bit to, I would prefer to be fluent, but I don't have to be. It's not like the world is going to come to an end. It would be nice to be fluent, but I'm not going to be, because I'm a person who stutters. So why don't I just accept that I stutter, accept that it might be tense at times, because I know that accepting that actually makes it better. And there you go. So in combining this approach that allows you to say, wow, I don't need to be fluent. I should on myself. That's one of the things we say. Stop shoulding. Who said you should be fluent? That makes no sense. You stutter sometimes, and now you're going into a high stress situation. So we use some really good logic and comedy and connection, and a lot of exposure work. and fear reduction and desensitization, because none of it works without that. Okay. So I'm now going to pass the floor over to Margaret, who's going to share with us some of the things that we do at AIS to help clients achieve this state of not caring as much, caring, but not having it interfere with their ability to communicate effectively.
Hi, everybody. I'm Margaret Miller, and I'm going to be talking about really the B part of rational emotive behavioral therapy. So the behavioral piece. It all connects together, right? So Heather is talking about some of the rational disputing we might do. And one of the ways we help people change their core beliefs is finding evidence that maybe those beliefs aren't as well founded as I thought. So with the behavioral piece, we're actually asking people to kind of take on challenges, do things, try it out to gain evidence for themselves that that can change some of those core beliefs around stuttering. So before I get into some of the activities we do, Heather mentioned the idea of trauma and stuttering therapy, and I want to make it really clear that when we're giving people behavioral challenges, we're always keeping that piece in mind. Haya Goldstein-Schuff has done a lot of great work on this recently. I recommend you look it up if you haven't heard about it. But to really quickly summarize, we never want to be re-traumatizing when we're asking people to do behavioral challenges. So we always are checking in with our clients to make sure we're not putting them in the red zone where that fight or flight feeling is super activated. So working with clients to create these challenges, I'm going to give you some examples of some of the kinds of core beliefs that we might give clients behavioral challenges to dispute. So a big one that we hear a lot is, I have to hurry to say this, or the other person will lose patience, right? And it's got that have to, that should. I can't stand it if this person has to wait for me because they're impatient, right? So to challenge that, we might have people actually try making other people wait on purpose. And, it doesn't even have to be with a speech activity. Sometimes people, the idea of actually making your stutter longer on purpose is really overwhelming. That's a red zone activity. But you don't have to do it with speech. You can, for example, go to the supermarket, take out your change purse and pay with cash and count out exact change and be that person that holds up the line. And what you're doing is you're building evidence that, hey, I did that. It was uncomfortable. And you know what? I tolerated it and nothing exploded, right? So that kind of idea of just trying some of the scary things to see, to build evidence for yourself. I'm going to talk about a few examples from experiences I've had with people I've worked with. So I have a teenager I'm working with who really wants to go into the career of real estate. He's just got a passion for it. And he was telling me that he is not sure that someone who stutters can go into real estate. So this is an example of a time when I gave him the best evidence you can have, which is a successful person in real estate who stutters, okay? And so when we're talking about this idea of disputing a core belief with evidence, the core belief is stuttering doesn't go with real estate. The evidence is someone's actually doing it. And with that kid, it was a pretty amazing reaction and immediate change. And what I loved about that meeting most of all is the thing he took away from it was that he also didn't know that you could have a girlfriend and be someone who stutters. But with some evidence, he now knows that you can. And right now he's working on talking to some girls that he's interested in. So that's kind of one of the benefits. Like, we have a bunch of different clients who stutter because we're only a stuttering practice, and we can connect them with people. But I think there are a lot of people in this room who know a lot of people who stutter. And that's an idea to kind of take away, is that meeting someone who's interested in something that you're also interested in can be a good way to just kind of see what the possibilities are. I'm going to talk about another client who really felt she could not talk with the people in her life about stuttering. And the core belief there is kind of, it would be too awkward. It would be overwhelming. So a kind of awfulizing of what the experience of talking with her family about stuttering would be like. So we will often give clients something called friends and family surveys, which is a few questions for your family about stuttering. The questions themselves as much as just that opportunity to get out there and talk to someone about stuttering, because you're testing this belief that talking about stuttering is awful. And in this case, she actually did have a little bit of a tough time talking to her family. And in a way, that was almost the best result she could have had, because she found that, yes, it was awkward. And you know what? She could stand it, and she actually gained something by it. And once she got over that hurdle of, I can't stand talking to these people about stuttering, she found that she wanted to talk to them more. We ended up having them all in for a family meeting where she really kind of passionately explained to them what her therapy was all about, because she no longer had this core belief, we can't talk about it. And that's not uncommon for people to find, that not only is family willing to hear about stuttering, but they actually kind of want to talk about it and are curious about it. So another example is the idea that my classmates can't know. So you probably all met someone who, in the context of their school days, has given a presentation to their classmates about stuttering. That's a behavioral activity straight out of REBT, where we're giving people an opportunity to test the theory. Ooh, if my classmates know about this, they'll make fun of me, right? And it's, again, something we very carefully find out if the person is ready for. But if they are, it's often a big turning point. Let's see, what are some other core beliefs? So, here's one. I really like to do some core belief testing when people are over worried about others' reactions. Okay, so a lot of people I talk to are very carefully monitoring every way that someone reacts to their stuttering. So if I say, how'd that conversation go? The answer is often not even did I stutter or did I not stutter, but what did the other person think? Oh, they didn't seem to notice, or, oh, they did seem to notice and it was awful, right? So challenging the idea, first, that we need to care what other people think, but second, that other people are definitely going to react badly to stuttering. So some ways to do that, of course, you can try voluntary stuttering to kind of test out what the other person, what other people do. And I've done this with kids, for example, where we go and talk to 20 people. And if this kid's core belief is people are usually going to react badly when I stutter, and they talk to 20 people and maybe one person gets a funny look on their face, that often changes their core belief. And I don't mean this to diminish that some people really can be cruel, right? And if that happens while we're doing an exercise like this, we talk about it. But even just having this kind of experimental mindset, I'm going to have some curiosity about whether this person's going to make fun of me or not, instead of I'm going to dread whether this person's going to make fun of me or not. So a kind of next level thing I like to do with something like that, I've only done this a few times, but I think it's pretty fun, is to make like a bingo game of all the possible listener reactions that you could get. And I do this especially with people who really are dissecting every move their listener makes. So we will just brainstorm enough possible reactions to fill a bingo card. And to do that, you have to get pretty creative, right? So it could be the person starts talking to the person next to me instead of to me. It could be the person makes fun of my stutter. To fill up 25 squares, you've got to come up with some really wild ones. But what it is doing in terms of this challenging core beliefs thing is it is leading the person to start to see that you actually can want a listener reaction to be negative. Like, you want to get bingo, right? And this is especially fun for like really driven kids who are competitive. I have been out walking with a kid who got frustrated that he wasn't getting all the squares on his bingo card. So he started stuttering longer and louder to see if he could get people to react badly. And what a huge change of mindset from, ooh, a bad reaction is something I have to fear, to actually, if I choose to, I could even desire that. And again, like, it is very normal and human to want people to like you and approve of you and respond positively when you speak. And this work is never about diminishing those very real feelings, but it is about kind of turning them from really awfulizing to what we call healthy negative emotions, which is, oh, someone made fun of me. I didn't like that. That was pretty unpleasant. But it doesn't destroy me. It doesn't change who I am fundamentally. So I think we have about 10 minutes left. Is that right? And I was going to leave some time for questions.
Yeah, I was just going to add, piggybacking on that, it's very much about the semantics and the words we use when we talk to ourselves, that this is how these core beliefs are formed. Okay. So kind of give it a concrete example. The one I said before, I have to be fluent, shifting to, I prefer to be fluent. Okay, but I don't actually have to be. I'll give you another example that I kind of find very powerful. I think often people, as back to the trauma piece, people tend to, I think, the things that happen to us as children, we believe we should be over it by now, even if we never really processed it. So we have we're carrying around all this negative energy, and it's kind of held in memory as this awful, horrible thing that I can't touch or even talk about. So I had an interesting, I run a group, and the group tends to come up with their own theme. And the theme of this one group was they wanted to discuss shameful experiences that they had had with their stuttering. And it was deep. And, some of them, it really got kind of heavy. But one of the things that came out of this meeting was someone said, that's interesting that you call that you were ashamed, because that exact thing happened to me. And I was embarrassed. I was a little embarrassed, but come on, you don't have to be ashamed of that. Like, you're human. And this is what I mean about the connection piece back to the REBT, right? And when you think about it, what Margaret said is very important. We have healthy negative emotions. We're supposed to get embarrassed if we have toilet paper on our shoe. But you go, and you take it off and you go on your merry business. You don't say, oh, I'm such a horrible person. I should have checked my shoe to make sure there was no toilet paper on it. And we can sort of apply that a little bit to stuttering. Say, you know what? I stuttered in front of that guy. He looked at me, he smiled, and I said, oh, you noticed that I stuttered. And then, you know what? All the energy was back. I felt my empowerment back. And, it was a little embarrassing, but you're right. It wasn't really shameful. And I think even just those kinds of processing, the words that people use, even just to say, one of the things we discuss a lot in therapy is you're demanding that other people approve of you and like you. Okay. And I say, is that fair? And the question I ask is, do you like, and do you approve of every person that you meet? And of course, the answer is absolutely not. But the more important question is, do they go home caring? Do they go home thinking, oh, I met that person today, and I bet they didn't approve or like me? So why do you, as a person who stutters, feel that you need to give your power away? So these are kind of the discussions. And again, I think when you're doing this kind of work in individual therapy, bringing the group dynamic into it and bringing connection into it, again, can be really, really helpful. And also with these challenges, as Margaret was saying, like we have one of the things we used to do was a stuttering scavenger hunt. And they were 10 different things on the list that you had to do that were kind of like exposure exercises that the group came up with on their own. So walk up to a policeman, tell them you're a person who stutters, and stutter voluntarily. They thought that was an important thing to do. And they created the scavenger hunt as a group. They assigned points to each one. They split up into teams and then had a time limit, and they tried to see how many they can accomplish. And as Margaret was saying, when you're in tension, that's the word we use a lot. When you're in tension, is to get a certain reaction, then you don't fear it if it happens. You relish in it and you congratulate yourself for getting it. So that kind of flipping in the mentality is also a big part of it. Okay, so if we can definitely take any questions, if anybody has any about REBT or the work that we do.
I have a question for you, Heather. What's this subway exercise that I keep hearing about where you send your clients into the subway?
Oh, that one. You know what's very funny about that? I'm going to tell you an honest thing now. This is very funny. When I first came to AIS and I looked at some of the things, I really thought the subway challenge looked to be one of the stupidest things I'd ever seen in my whole life. I was like, wow, wait, what? And I kind of went with the program and we get mixed reactions. So what it is you go on the subway with a group of other people who stutter. And at some point during the train ride, you go, hey, everybody, just want you to know, a group of us here stutter. You can voluntary stutter if you want. You don't have to. We're working on our public speaking and getting over our fear of talking in public. If anybody has any questions, there's a group of us over here. Sometimes we get a smattering of applause. Every once in a while you get, wow, that's really cool. And you get some engagement. Most of the time people don't even look up because they're just used to, people asking for money on the train. But I always check in with our clients. We don't have anyone do it if they're not, up for it. It's kind of almost like, I don't know, this badge of honor that's come down through the pike of years and years of people going through AIS programming. But they say that it's like it's a big high, that they're like, wow, who cares? It was so silly and fun. And it's back to that connection thing. You've got your stuttering buddies there with you and, they're applauding. And then it's silly because then the train stops and they get out and run to the next car so someone else can do it. And then the next stop, they get out and run. So there's like a lot of laughing. So here's another thing that's a very big part of REBT when you think about it. Often stuttering is accompanied by very negative, heavy emotions, right? But there are times when you kind of do have to laugh at it, where something will happen, where it's kind of funny. And it's like, it's almost like how if you can laugh at something, it's a sign of healing. And I think that part of the subway challenge is that, like, that was so silly and stupid and had nothing to do with real life. And yet it felt really good and fun to be experiencing something that has to do with my stuttering while laughing at the same time, instead of feeling upset.
I forgot to say, in addition to taking questions, if anyone wants to share an experience they've had where they challenged a belief by doing something behavioral, I'd love to hear about it too.
Oh, Rick has his hand up.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I just have a question because I know that I don't have a problem, but some adults in the stuttering community and some speech professionals, they feel that Emily Blunt, I feel she does great work, but they say, complaining that she's not a really good role model for stuttering because she doesn't stutter. Even like Joe Biden and Emily Blunt, we don't hear them stuttering. So, I mean, I don't have a problem with that, but what are your thoughts on that? Now, I think she does great advocacy work, but there is some privately, some speech professionals say AIS uses these celebrities. I think it's professional jealousy, but just say something about Emily Blunt. I mean, she may be a covert stutterer. I mean,
no, that's a great question, Rick.
Please.
Thank you, that's great. First of all, we see Emily Blunt in her role, in her playing the role of Emily Blunt. She's discussed this. You don't get to see Emily Blunt home with her kids and her husband running around. Now, I'm not saying she stutters severely, but I've heard her stutter. But more importantly, More importantly. So I understand. So I'm all about the best role models being those people who have achieved a lot, but who also stutter openly. I totally agree with you there. But sometimes you got to get you got to take it where it comes. And like you said, Emily Blunt really does double down on understanding what it feels like to be a child who stutters, what it feels like to be bullied, what it feels like to be told, try it with an accent, and using that accent, making her stutter, and her talking about, in a very frank way, not even understanding what her authentic voice is. She's not quite sure. She's put on a voice and been an actress for so long. I'm sure maybe there are times when she's home with her kids or when the phone rings, where she's not Emily Blunt, the actress, but we don't see that, first of all. But I think probably the bigger issue is stuttering in the ear of the listener or is stuttering in the mouth of the speaker. So if someone tells us that they still, for example, walk into a room and say, gee, I wonder if I'm going to be able to say my name. Or after they speak, go, oh, that was a bad showing. I tripped up on so many words. Those are unique thoughts to people who stutter, okay? I'm not a person who stutters. I don't have those thoughts. So even if I have a lot of disfluency, I still don't have those thoughts. And I think those are very differentiating. And I believe from what I've told that Emily Blunt does have those thoughts. So I almost feel like, in a way, once a stutterer, always a stutterer, if you've done it long enough. Maybe if you recovered when you're 5, maybe you don't really remember it. But I don't know. I think if you've stuttered into your teens and your 20s, the idea of recovery is understanding what it feels like, but no longer having it bring you down. But you're still just as much a PWS as anybody else, in my opinion.
I would also add, and this is less about Emily and more about our whole array of celebrities who stutter, but we don't hear them stutter. I devoutly wish for more people to be seen in media and on television stuttering openly. But having seen so many people go through that decision-making process and the fear that comes with outing yourself, with stuttering openly, I would never want to make the decision for someone about when they're ready to do that. So I think each individual case, we have to give people the choice of how open to be about their stuttering. But I'm waiting for it.
Michael O'Shea, I would just like to compliment you on the statement that you made, Heather. You said precision fluency should not be the most valued outcome. Like, that is a powerful statement when you think about it. It takes an awful lot of pressure off the client when it's explained that way. Because in their head, they would say to themselves, they would even dream. And I was one of those people. I dreamt of being this fluent speaker where I could say anything, anywhere, anytime, at any moment. But like, I knew from experience that that wasn't going to be the outcome. And even though I speak very well now, and I manage my speech very well, deep down, I'm still a person of verbal difference. I stutter. And as soon as I let go of that need to be perfect, it made a huge difference. It made a huge difference.
Well, you just said it right there, the letting go. So people use the term wrong. People think letting go means accepting and having no power to change. You can very much change the tension and severity of stuttering, very much so. But it's in the letting go. It's a paradox upon a paradox, right? It's the Chinese proverb: the more you resist, the more it persists. And precision fluency, if you think about it, is the ultimate resistance. I speak that way, I'm going to overhaul it and speak in 100% different way. Talk about resisting what you naturally are. What a conflict.